everyone. So welcome to our, I believe, the second week of dealing with slope-intercept form. This whole week is not going to be much different than last week, except we're going to have to do a little more pre-work. How in the world do we identify the slope and the y-intercept when we don't have y equals mx plus b? Before we get there, I want to make sure that we understand what slope-intercept form is and different ways that it could show up. So just a reminder again to make sure that you're writing down the title. If you don't write down the title, you're going to miss some points there. So make sure, again, that you are doing that. All right, so let's start with slope-intercept. What is slope-intercept form? Now remember, that is just a very specific form that I want you to train your mind to recognize, whether I'm telling you the title, like slope-intercept form, or the actual equation. Now the most popular equation, or the most popular form, is right over there. It's y equals mx plus b. Let me make this slide a little smaller. Y equals mx plus b. Now, why in the world do they call this slope-intercept form? Because if you ever have y equals mx plus b, you know the slope and the y-intercept just by looking. You just got to train your mind. The m is always going to be your slope, aka the coefficient, whatever's multiplying the x. Whatever's adding or subtracting is going to be your y-intercept. And that, again, is just by understanding, hey, when I have y equals mx plus b, there are patterns going on there. And I can find the slope because, again, the slope is whatever's going to be multiplying, and then your b, which is the y-intercept, is going to be whatever you're adding and subtracting. Now, keep in mind that I gave you three other options here. One option here, another option here. Notice they're all in red. Now, what I'm trying to do here is to train you guys to see y equals mx plus b, although it's not exactly in this order, y equals mx plus b. Now, the biggest hint that I could give anyone in order to know whether you have slope-intercept form is to see if your equation is y equals. That is why I'm drawing a line down the equal sign and circling my y, because then I can concentrate on that y on the left side of that line, aka the equation sign, and see if it's isolated, see if it's by itself. If it is, more than likely you got slope-intercept form, which we do. Now notice you have b plus mx. Now, this is where I see students, they get so used to the order that they don't pay attention to where the slope is in the y-intercept. Our slope is whatever's multiplying the x. It's going to be the m still. Your b is the y-intercept. That says y-intercept, by the way. And again, look at these other two forms that we have left. If I were to draw a line down the equal sign and circle my y to pretty much visually show myself whether I have y by itself, these both do. Doesn't matter if the y is on the left side, the right side. As long as it's isolated, just like we do, we could recognize our slope and our y-intercept just by looking at what we have to the other side. The m is always going to be multiplying dx, aka the slope, and the b is always going to be adding or subtracting, so that's going to be the y-intercept. Even in my fourth one, notice again, the y is by itself, so your slope is going to be the coefficient of the x, the number in front of the x, whatever is multiplying. Then your b is still going to be the y-intercept. So notice that we have all these four ways that y equals mx plus b could show up. But again, the biggest thing I would tell you to look for is to see if your y is by itself. Once you get y by itself, you know that you have mx plus b. You just got to make sure you know where your m is and where your b is. Now, no matter what on your races, make sure you have this written down so that way I could grade and make sure that you're fully participating. That this is still the most popular. Y equals mx plus b. Now, why is it the most popular? I think it's just the way that it makes more sense, the mx and the b. But again, what I want you to do is to understand that when you have this guy, you really have the top four above as well. All right, so let's start doing some problems. I'm going to scroll down real quickly. So what I'm doing here is pretty much identifying if you know how to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So remember, whenever I tell you slope and y-intercept, what I'm really telling you to think is like, okay, do I have an equation in slope-intercept form? Let's look at number one. If I were to draw a line down my equal sign and circle my y, is your y by itself? And the answer is yes, it's by itself. That means that you know where your m is, aka your slope. You know what your b is, which is your y-intercept. Your m is always going to be the coefficient in front of the x, so it's going to be the -2. Your b, your y-intercept, is going to be whatever you're adding and subtracting, which is going to be the +5. All right, so again, let's just do this over, just see more examples. Let's see number two. Is your y by itself? Is it isolated to one side of the equation? The answer is yes. That means that you have your slope and your y-intercept. Your slope is always going to be That's an m equals 5. Let me write that little nice just so there's no confusion. Your m, your slope, is always going to be the coefficient in front of the x, which in this situation is a 5. Your b, your y-intercept, is going to be whatever you're adding subtracting to that x. So in this situation, it is going to be a -3. So again, all you're doing is training your mind to see these things. All right, so let's do number 3 now. Is your y by itself? I think by now it's pretty, you're getting it down, right? The slope is just going to be whatever is the coefficient in front of your x, which in this situation is a 3. And your b is going to be whatever you're adding and subtracting. So there's your slope, there's your y-intercept. Now let's do one last one. Notice again that your y is by itself, so you can go ahead and identify your slope and your y-intercept. Keep reminding yourself, what are we doing here? We're making sure that we identify y equals mx plus b, or we know when we're in slope-intercept form in order to find the slope and the y-intercept. So notice that here, I don't have any coefficient in front of my x, so whenever you don't have anything there, there's really just the 1 there. We just don't write it, it's a little repetitive, right? There's 1x, so that means my coefficient would be 1. My slope is 1. And then my y-intercept would be a 10 because, again, that is what you're adding and subtracting to your x. So cool. Notice that all those 4 problems had y equals mx plus b form. So they were pretty easy to find. Now, just before we move on, I want to remind yourself to make sure you're writing down the numbers. If you're not writing down those numbers, you're either doing 2 things. You're not watching the videos or you're not following instructions. Make sure you're writing down 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth and so forth. Okay. All right, so let's identify the slope and the y-intercept of the following. Now let's look at my first one. Remember, in order to find your slope and your y-intercept just by looking at it, you need to have y equals mx plus b, aka your y has to be by itself. Notice that my y is not by itself, so there's no way you can identify the slope and the y-intercept. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to make it y equals mx plus b. We're going to get the y by itself in order to identify the slope and the y-intercept. So pretty much, when you don't have slope-intercept form, get it to slope-intercept form. So this is what I like to do. I like to put a line down my equal sign, circle whatever I'm trying to solve for, whatever I'm trying to get by itself in an equation. In this situation, it would be a y. And then it helps me visually see what I need to get rid of. I need to get rid of that -2x. Now, what's the opposite of -2x? Well, it's just adding 2x. If I were to add 2x to both sides, that would cancel out. Notice that your y is going to be now by itself. Now, we have to do the math on the right. Notice you have 7 and 2x. You can't combine these because they're not like terms. So you just rewrite them. Now, notice that 7 is a positive. I'm going to put a plus, so that way it makes it a little more visually easy, but it's just 2x plus 7, which is what I have left over. Now that I have y equals by itself, I know what my slope is, I know what my y-intercept is. My b is always going to be in front of the x, which is a 2. I'm sorry, my m is going to be the coefficient in front of the x, which in this situation is a 2. And your b, your y-intercept, is going to be whatever you're adding and subtracting. All right, let's go to number 2. Notice that, again, your y is not by yourself, so you don't know the slope-intercept form. You have to get it to slope-intercept form. Now, when I circled that y, I visually saw that I need to get rid of the -5x, so that's why I added 5x on both sides. End up with y is equal to, now let me write my pluses correctly here, 5x plus 4. I cannot combine those because one has an x, one doesn't. Now that I have in slope-intercept form, I can see my m and my b, aka my slope and my y-intercept. My slope is always going to be in front of the x, and my b is going to be whatever adding or subtracting that x. All right, this one looks a little more complicated, but notice it's almost exactly the same thing. All you're doing is just doing a little more work, solving for that y. Notice that we have 2 things to get rid of now. Get rid of one at a time. Don't try to confuse yourself by doing everything at once. I'm going to minus that 2x. I'll be left with it. Y minus 4 is equal to a -2x. Notice that -2x plus 0 is just -2x because anything plus 0 is 0, so I'm just going to leave it like that. And then I'm going to finally get rid of that 4 because, again, you have to get rid of everything on that side with the y. You're isolating the y. You're getting it by itself. Now, it's pretty easy to see now that I have, that's a 4 by the way, because I added 4 to both sides, -2x plus 4. Let me write that a little better so that there's no confusion. -2x plus 4. Now that you have it in slope-intercept form, you know your slope and your y-intercept. Your slope is -2. The y-intercept is a positive 4. Now, last but not least, let's do the next one. So notice that now, again, I'm solving for a y. Notice I didn't solve for 2y, because again, I need to get the y by itself. And now I have to get that 2 out of here. Now, how in the world do I get rid of that 2? Well, what is it doing to the y? It's multiplying. So the opposite would be to divide. Now remember that in order to keep this equation equivalent, you have to divide everything. If you divide one side by 2, you have to divide everything by 2. These 2 cancel out because 2 divided by 2 is 1, so you're left with a y. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 7 divided by 2, you cannot reduce any way, shape, or form. You can't divide. Now, don't leave decimals because it's important to have fractions. So pretty much whenever you can divide, what you want to do is just leave it exactly the way it is. Just reduce it if possible. Notice in the situation where we're unable to, so that means we are done with this problem. We figured out our slope. We figured out our y-intercept. Again, just by making sure that we're solving for the x. All right, so almost done here. All we have to do now is graph the following and let's see. Graph the following, identify the slope and intercept form. So it's a lot of the same skills that we did before. You just got to make sure that you're taking your time. So if I'm looking at this one here, in order to solve for the slope and the y-intercept, you need to get y by itself. So notice there's multiple things that I need to get rid of. I need to get rid of the 10 and 5. Always get rid of what you're adding and subtracting. So that 10. I'm going to minus 10 on both sides. These cancel out. You're left with 5. Y is equal to negative 7x minus 10. Now, how in the world am I going to get rid of that 5? Well, remember that 5 is multiplying. So the opposite would be to divide. Make sure to keep the equation equivalent by dividing everything by 5. You're left with y is equal to negative 7/5 x minus 2. Notice I could reduce 10 divided by 2, but I cannot reduce negative 7 over 5. So, quick graph. Now, keep in mind that I don't want you to make a table today. All I want to see is a quick graph. Now, we do have to identify our slope and y-intercept. So what would be my slope? Negative 7 over 5, and my y-intercept would be a negative 2. My y-intercept, since it's negative 2, 1, 2 would be right over there. And then my slope would say that I'm going down and over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry, down 7 over 5. Because remember, rise, change of y over change of x. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm going to go over 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. So that is my graph. Really quick sketch, and that's about as far as I want you to get. So I'm going to go ahead and do number 7 here just to have a little space in my eraser to do the following 2. All right, so again, solving for y, notice that this one's quite easy because all I have to do is get rid of that negative 4. How do I get rid of that negative 4? Well, just by adding 4 to both sides. You'll be left with 3x plus 4 is equal to a positive y. Now that I have it in that form, in slope-intercept form, I can find my slope really easy because it's the coefficient in front of the x. And your b is whatever is adding and subtracting. So this one's going to be quite easy to graph. I need to start at my y-intercept to say positive 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, which is going to be right over there. And I'm going to use my slope. Remember, when you have a whole number, put it over 1 so you can see the rise over the run. The change in y over change of x, I'm going to change 3, 1, 2, 3 in the y direction, and then I'm going to change 1 in the x direction. And that is your guys' graph. So I'm going to erase this and make sure you have it in your guys' notes. So, all right, so last but not least, let's do number 6 and 8. So here is my y. I'm going to minus x on both sides because, again, whatever you're adding is trying to get rid of it. The x is adding, the 2 is multiplying. These cancel out, you're left with 2 times y is equal to a negative x minus 4. Again, you cannot combine these because one has a variable and the other doesn't. Now solving for that y, all you have to do is divide by 2. Remember, divide everything by 2. Y is going to be equal to, now I'm not sure about you guys, but I like to see that 1 in front of my x. I'll see that I have negative 1 over 2x minus 2 left over. My slope is going to be a negative 1/2. My b, which is my y-intercept, is going to be a negative 2. If I were to graph this, my y-intercept would be 1, 2, negative 2 right over here. And then my y-intercept, or my slope, would be a negative 1 over 2. Remember, negative means you're going down 1. You're still going to the positive right because the negative is just above in the numerator. Twice, 1, 2, and then that is your slope. To help you draw your other line. All right, last but not least, let's get over this one. So solving for that y, notice you have a negative that is technically a negative 1. Again, always write those ones because it helps you be more visually aware of what's in front of there. Minusing 5, because what you're adding and subtracting, you end up with 4x minus 5 is equal to a negative 1y. Now you can see clearly what you need to do. That negative 1 is multiplying, so make sure you divide everything by negative 1. Positive divided by negative is just going to be a negative 4x. Negative and a negative is going to be a positive 5. Remember that the negatives cancel out, so you'll be left with y. Just to reiterate, I think I might have got mixed up, but let me just double check. A positive divided by negative is going to be a negative 4. Negative 5 divided by negative 1 is going to be a positive 5. Because remember, same signs are positive, different signs are negative. So my slope here is going to be a positive 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think I'm mixing up my slope when I'm saying that. And then my y-intercept, my b is equal to 5, and then my slope is equal to a negative 4. That helps you put it over 1 so that way you can see it. So let's go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. I know it's kind of hard, especially as you can see me, but just make sure your sketch is somewhere in the vicinity and you're going to get your full points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then over 1 in the positive direction is going to be over there. So that is your slope. So remember that I pretty much went down 4 over 1. If you need more help on that part, you have to watch the other videos because, again, we're building on all this math. So you want to make sure that you are building along